Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Entitled, glamorous, and just a little too famous for her own good. Today's story is about a minor celebrity who thought the world, and retail Q, revolved around her. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Rude actress tells me off. While I was at uni, over 10 years ago now, I worked part-time in a popular clothing/accessory store. It was over Christmas, so really busy. The store's tiny, so it gets full quickly. I'm on the tills and notice an older, very glamorous-looking lady waiting in the queue. She looks irritated and keeps looking at my coworker and I as if to say, "Hurry up." The queue's very long, but we don't mess around and are pretty quick even if wrapping gifts up. She gets to my till, I smile and say hello, thanks for waiting, politely as always, and proceed to scan and bag her items. I recognize her now she's in front of me, but don't let on obviously. She's not super famous, but I know who she is, as I used to watch the soap operas she was in back in the day. Anyway, she's not interested in talking to me or even smiling, so I just get on with it. I say bye and she walks off. I call the next customer over, and before I've even had a chance to finish saying hello, I heard the beep, beep, beep of the door alarms going off. The actress lady marches back over to me, cuts off the current customer, and says, "You have failed to remove the security tags." I say sorry, although I'm certain I did remove them already. I check the items, then tell her there's no tags on them. I suggest it could be something else in her other bags, but she ignores me and storms off. I carry on serving my customer, but the alarms go off again. Actress lady marches back, looking furious, and says, "Really? This is ridiculous. Why haven't you removed them? If it happens again, I'll be asking for a refund." She barely looks at me and has such a horrible attitude. I'm a bit embarrassed now, as there's a massive queue of people just staring. I take the items out of her bag, and yes, all the tags are off, as they were to begin with. I'm getting a bit annoyed at her rudeness and quite curtly tell her, "There are no tags on these items. Look, I've checked twice. The alarms are being set off from something in your other bags." At this point, another coworker comes over and asks the lady if she can look in her bags just to check what's setting the alarms off. The lady does not even answer her, but just makes a kind of huffing noise and thrusts her bags out to coworker. Coworker checks bags and looks in another store's bag. Lo and behold, there's a security tag left on something she purchased. Coworker double checks by putting it through the alarms. The lady, who's still standing in front of the till, kind of raises her chin and looks at me. I just give her a big smug smile, raising my eyebrows and carrying on talking to the current customer, saying, "Thank you for being so patient." Rude lady doesn't even say sorry, thank you, or bye. She just storms out as if it was our fault another store left the security tag on. Classic case of someone thinking the world revolves around them. Extra points for thinking her fame would excuse the attitude. You handled it like a champ, though, especially with that polite but smug smile at the end. Gotta love when karma works immediately and publicly. And our second story. I bought HOA land. I live in Southern Illinois, and back in 2006, when the IT company I co-owned was at the peak of its profitability, I bought a house in a quiet subdivision with that familiar asphalt patchwork of streets and perfectly manicured lawns. Just beyond the neighborhood lies a flooded granite quarry, an emerald green lake so clear you can see every shard of rock on the bottom. When my wife and I bought the house, that lake felt like a bonus. After work, I'd often take our 7-year-old son and 5-year-old daughter down there to skip stones and feed the ducks. The trouble started when our nearby HOA, proudly calling itself Stinky Karen's Hole, all names have been changed, suddenly decided the quarry belonged exclusively to them. Within weeks, gravel paths, benches carved with the HOA logo, and signs reading "Private HOA property, no trespassing" appeared. One evening, a uniformed guard stopped us on the trail and sternly told me and my kids that we weren't allowed there. That same day, I met the HOA president, Barbara, a textbook Karen in an expensive pantsuit. Chin raised, she threw out, "Everyone knows it's private property. If you don't like it, hire a lawyer." I didn't hire a lawyer. I hired my older brother. More precisely, I asked him to split a six-pack with me while we scrolled through the county cadastral database. Bob's a licensed broker. 5 minutes work for him. Here's what he found. The parcel under the lake had never been deeded to the HOA. The real owner was Mrs. Florence Griffin, an 89-year-old widow of the mine's last operator, now living with her daughter in Florida. The county had tacked almost $3,000 in back property taxes onto the land, and the local tax collector was quietly dreaming of auctioning it off. Bob called Florence, politely introduced himself, and explained, "There are neighbors who'd take care of your land and pay off the tax bill." I joined the Zoom call and saw a thin elderly woman with a gentle smile. She reminded me of my own grandmother. I offered her $5,000 for the 50-acre tract, plus payment of all back taxes and escrow costs. Most of the acreage was swampy and had zero infrastructure, so the price was low, and I thought, fair, no one else had shown interest in years. She began to cry, saying the quarry had taken her husband's life and was now draining her money every year. For her, our offer was a ticket to live out her days in peace. We signed the deal, and no one in the HOA had a clue. After escrow closed, I changed nothing for a few months. Barbara kept barking orders and fining residents who dared walk near the water. Meanwhile, I secured an insurance policy and filed an application with the city council to turn the quarry into a public park. The city agreed, needing only proof of liability coverage and minimal infrastructure. I planned opening day like a little festival, mailing gold-embossed invitations to every household. The HOA blew a gasket. Barbara called an emergency board meeting to figure out what was happening. I walked in with a stack of documents. Page 1, the deed. Current owner, my name. You could slice the silence in the room with a butter knife. I laid an invoice on the table for $12,400, the amount the city inspector had assessed for the HOA's illegally installed benches, paths, and fencing. "Feel free to remove your property," I said, sliding over copies of the citations, "but you'll also cover the cost of hauling everything away and restoring the soil." Barbara went pale. Her vice president started mumbling about a misunderstanding. That's when a neighbor spoke up. "Barbara, why are we paying for quarry improvements if the HOA never owned the land?" A dead hush followed until Steve, another neighbor, raised his hand and repeated the question. Fear flashed in Barbara's eyes, but she muttered something about partnership agreements. The room erupted. I slipped out. I'd heard enough. Outside, angry voices were already buzzing. That evening, our neighborhood chat lit up with screenshots of my deed and calculations of how much each family had donated for benches and signs. Within hours, a parents' action group met in Steve's garage. They voted to demand a special election for the board and an independent financial audit. 2 weeks later, auditors from the city's Consumer Protection Department arrived. They pulled 5 years of HOA bank statements and found a $187,000 hole. Payments for lake maintenance and landscaping had flowed through shell companies conveniently owned by Barbara's nephew. The department head forwarded everything to the county prosecutor. Charges: fraud, embezzlement of community funds, falsifying financial records. Classification: Illinois Class 3 felony, up to 5 years in prison. Bail conditions: Barbara was removed from office and placed under house arrest with a GPS anklet. Her mumbling vice president cut a deal and testified about kickbacks on every fine issued. The neighbors filed a class action suit demanding reimbursement of overpaid dues and damages for emotional distress. The HOA's insurer, seeing a jury would crucify them, settled out of court. Each family got a check averaging $3,800 and reduced dues for the next 3 years. 9 months later, the judge pronounced sentence. Mrs. Miller, Barbara, you are hereby given 4 years probation, 1,200 hours of community service, and full restitution of $187,000. Barbara was ordered to clean public parks and pick up trash in an orange vest reading "Community Service Fraud Convict." 6 months after the verdict, she sold her house to cover the HOA's debts and moved in with her sister in Arizona. As for me, every morning I watch the sunlight sparkle on the lake and remember a simple truth. Ownership is a responsibility, not a license to shout, "Hire a lawyer." And each time I toss a pebble into the water with my kids, the ripples spread, reminding me that a well-placed wave can wash away even the most concrete arrogance. Power is corrupted, Karens. But what if it had even more power? I hope we never find out. And our last story. This is my house, lady. When we moved into our new house a few years back, it felt like a fresh start. Everything was in order, boxes unpacked, furniture arranged, and we were finally settling into a rhythm. It was one of those rare, perfect Louisiana days, the kind where the heat didn't feel like it was trying to bake you alive and the humidity wasn't clinging to your skin like a wet blanket. Just the kind of day that makes you want to be outside, soak it in, and feel grateful for simple things. Naturally, I decided to get out into the garden. Gardening's always been a calming hobby for me, something that helped me decompress and feel connected to a place. I figured it was the perfect opportunity to give our new flower beds some love and get familiar with the soil in our new space. I was out there maybe half an hour pulling weeds, trimming back the shrubs, and admiring how nicely the light hit our rose bushes. That's when I noticed a woman walking slowly along the side of our house. At first, I didn't think much of it. In new neighborhoods, people often stroll by to check out who's moved in, maybe introduce themselves. She looked pleasant enough, maybe in her 50s, with big sunglasses and that overly curious air some folks just naturally carry. She complimented the garden, said it looked lovely, then asked me how much I charged for landscaping work. I smiled and explained, "Oh, ma'am, I don't offer services. It's just something I enjoy for myself." She nodded, chuckled, and for a second it felt like a friendly, harmless conversation. Around that time, my husband walked out of the house carrying a box to the car. We were still moving a few things around, reorganizing, cleaning out some clutter from the move, nothing unusual. He gave the woman a polite nod and kept going about his business. I figured that'd be the end of the conversation, but instead of walking off or saying goodbye, the woman sort of hesitated, then disappeared down the street. Weird, I thought, but whatever. Maybe 10 to 15 minutes later, we heard the unmistakable sound of police sirens approaching. Not just one car, but 3. Lights flashing, pulling into the street like there was some major situation going down. My husband and I looked at each other, confused. It didn't occur to us at first that they were here for us. We figured maybe there had been an accident nearby or someone down the street needed help. But no, all 3 cop cars stopped right in front of our house. Officers stepped out, serious expressions on their faces. One of them approached us and said, "We received a call about an act of burglary in progress at this address." A burglary? At our house? I stood there speechless for a moment before I managed to say, "This is our home. We just moved in last week." My husband stepped up with our IDs, and thankfully we had the home purchase documents still handy from all the recent paperwork chaos. We showed them our licenses, the deed, utility bills with our names, anything to prove we weren't robbing our own place. The officers looked mildly embarrassed, but mostly annoyed, probably at the waste of their time. They asked a few more questions, took down our information, and then left after realizing the only crime happening was a new couple trying to get their lives in order. As it turns out, that friendly woman who'd chatted me up in the garden had gone straight down the street and called the cops the moment she saw my husband carrying a box to the car. No questions, no checking in, no neighborly concern, just a snap judgment and a phone call. What rattled me the most wasn't just the accusation, but how fast she went from small talk to calling 911. Not once did she say, "Hey, I didn't realize anyone had moved in," or even ask, "Is everything okay?" It was just instant escalation. And the worst part? She knew we'd just moved in. There were still moving boxes piled by the curb. She had to know. But she did it anyway. After that day, she never spoke to us again. She'd pass by our house and avoid eye contact like we've done something wrong. We later learned from another neighbor that she had a reputation for being a bit dramatic. Apparently, we weren't her first false alarm. That experience stuck with me. It's one thing to be cautious, sure, but the way she handled it made us feel like intruders in our own home. It left this lingering feeling that someone was always watching, waiting to find fault. In a neighborhood that otherwise seemed peaceful, was a pretty jarring welcome. We've since built better relationships with the other folks on the street, ones who've actually gotten to know us and treat us like people, not potential criminals. But every time I'm out in the garden now, I still glance down the sidewalk to see if anyone's watching. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I've learned that some people don't need a reason to assume the worst. And to this day, every time I think of that perfect garden day, I also remember standing in front of my own home, explaining to police officers that I belong here. This story sums up exactly how someone's ignorance or bias can turn an ordinary moment into something traumatic. She knew you lived there, she made conversation with you, and yet she still chose to escalate without asking a single follow-up question. It's unsettling how easily people reach for the worst assumptions. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.